What if everything you're experiencing right now was happening for you instead of to you? Today, we're going to uncover the limitless possibility of higher consciousness and greater perspective. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn McCarthy, and today is going to be an amazing day. Today, we're exploring the very uncomfortable, unpopular opinion that everything is happening for you. Oh my gosh, I remember when I first heard that, I thought, well, this is so ridiculous and unfounded and ungrounded and imaginary. How is that even possible? How is everything that's happening in my life happening for me? How is that possible for everyone? If it's all happening for me, then how is it possible that it's also all happening for you and for him and for her and for, yep. Just hold for me for a moment a beginner's mindset as we go into this beautiful episode of holding the possibility that everything is happening for you. This is such a fascinating perspective because it goes in complete odds with why is everything happening to me? I mean, isn't that the perspective that most of the time we take? In fact, you can just imagine or remember your own language. You hear it all the time. Why is this happening to me? Why is she doing this to me? Why is everything falling apart to me or making things worse for me? We tend to create this storyline in our heads that we are victims of greater senses of attack. And, I'm not going to negate that. I don't want to negate when people are intentionally going after another group of people. We all know that that is happening all over our world right now. And this perspective is not meant to negate the atrocities happening in Israel, the atrocities happening within our own country. Anytime there is anger or violence pointed towards somebody, I'm talking about you in your everyday, in your private practice, in your academic setting, in your own home. I'm talking about the experience of being or feeling like a victim of your circumstances. I mean, even the weather can seem like it's against you. I'm remembering for a moment a friend of mine, this was years ago when we had little kids, and she was planning a birthday party. And I'll never forget, the storm started rolling in. And I remember her looking up at the sky saying, "Oh my gosh, is this really happening? I can't believe this is happening to me. This always happens to me." And it's so interesting because when we take a different perspective, we can see that actually the weather doesn't care about you at all. It's not doing anything for or against you. It's just happening, and it has zero indication of your worth, your desires, your deservancy of your desires, the goals you have in place. It's just the weather, and it has no feelings towards you. And yet we create this narrative for ourselves that things are happening to us. Sometimes that feels really personal. Right? We think, why is my friend not responding to me? Why is she doing this to me? Why is my uncle saying those words to me? Why is he doing this to me? Today, I want to explore a little perspective shift that will elevate your empowerment every single time you find yourself feeling like you're the victim of your situation. And that is changing that one little language, that one little sentence. Why is this happening to me? To, wow, how can this be happening for me? And what I'm really reaching for is, ready for this one? A moment of gratitude. Every single situation that happens, even if it makes us feel very sad and uncomfortable or angry or frustrated or hurt or lonely or abandoned, is an opportunity for us to receive greater knowledge, greater insight, new perspective. And right there lands our ability to find gratitude and our chance for us to realize that everything could be happening for us. In fact, it is. I'm going to take an example from this weekend that felt very emotional for me. And I remember this feeling anytime I was failing at something. So when I was first starting my orthodontic business, my orthodontic practice, and it felt hard, and we had actually another person who was an orthodontist in our community called up the office and told us that a patient had accidentally driven to her office, and they welcomed her into their new patient exam. So they had mistaken the two offices. They had intended to go to ours, but they went to the wrong one. And that orthodontist said, well, since you're here, let's go ahead and give you a new patient exam. And the patient went on to continue her treatment there. And I remember that feeling so wounding at the time. I was just starting out. We started with 0 patients, and this one patient was very precious to us. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, why is this happening to me? Isn't it interesting how in that situation, our emotions keep us stuck in that perspective? And it makes so much sense because when our emotions are feeling low level, so I'm talking about the ones that make you feel disempowered, the emotions that make you feel victimized, that make you feel angry, stressed out, frustrated, fearful, ashamed, any of those low-level emotions immediately trigger a response in your body. And that response is a fight or flight sequence of events that happens in a hormonal fashion that literally takes over your body and your brain and cuts off your executive functioning. Not only your executive functioning, but cuts off your greater perspective and your access to higher consciousness. So in that moment, it constricts, it limits, it makes a narrowed field of perspective. It gives us a myopic view of what's actually happening, and our world suddenly shrinks. She is doing that to me, right? That's the perspective. Here's the real interesting perspective, however. If we take a moment and pull way back out of there, get out of emotions, get out of time, right? Now, this is years later. This is why we always say hindsight is 20/20. Why? Because we're not attached to the thing in the moment. Now we have time as perspective, and we can look back and say, oh my gosh, that was just one patient. Did it impact me? No. That was just one moment in time of a behavior of that other orthodontist in the community. Did it really impact me? Not even a little bit. Did it establish for me a certain relationship and clarity over her, the way she ran her business? Absolutely. And now I can see, looking back, wow, that was really happening for me. Because it actually helped me be more clear with my potential patients on how to find us. It helped me realize, oh, people are used to going to that office, so clearly it's easier. Their mind thinks there's an orthodontist office over there, so I got to be a little bit more creative about establishing where our practice is. Maybe a little bit more clarity. Maybe the wording that my receptionist is using can be more clear on how to find us. Maybe I can use technology and Google Ads or give them some resources to find our practice more readily. Actually, this is really happening for me because all it cost me was one patient, but now I have the ability to attract so many more. Not just that, but I have clarity in terms of that orthodontist perspective over whether or not she wants to collaborate or compete. I have great clarity over the professionals in our neighborhood. Fabulous. Now I can see that that moment was happening for me. It also gave me a great opportunity to choose perspective. See, the thing is that there are always a million different ways to look at any situation. In fact, there is arguably not another person who sees it the way you do, and not another moment in time that you will see it the way you do. I was talking about an event that happened to me this weekend. So this is very personal to me because it involves my children, and parenting is always personal to me. But I had a moment with my daughter this weekend where she absolutely refused to leave the house. She's 11 years old, and she just put her foot down and refused to leave the house. My daughter is 6 inches taller than I am. For those of you who don't know, I have a very, very tall husband. And so my 11-year-old is 6 inches taller than me. And when she sits down on the ground and says, I refuse to move, there's really not much I can do about that situation. She's refusing to move. On that same day, my middle child, my son, was running in his final state cross-country meet. He had earned his way there. He got a spot in the States. It was a big deal. It was 2 hours away from our home. We had all coordinated to go together to support him as a family. We're leaving it at the last minute when we could possibly make it up there to give ourselves 2 hours before the event started. And my daughter decided to sit down and refuse to go. Her anxiety started kicking in, and she couldn't articulate to me why she didn't want to go. All she knew is she couldn't. And I don't know if any of you have ever noticed this in anybody who's experiencing anxiety and fear. When you look in their eyes and it's just a blank stare, and you say, but why don't you want to go? And they just almost can't even respond. That's the moment we were having. My old self would have seen this as manipulative. She's trying to manipulate me. She's trying to take attention away from her older brother. She's trying to run the show. She's trying to orchestrate how this family is going to run today. My very current self also went into, why is this happening to me? I want so badly to support my son. I want to be there for him. I want him to know that he matters, that I value him, that I'm there for him, and I'm so proud of him. This really matters. This feels like a big, important moment in time, and I want to be there for him. In fact, the truth of the matter is I had arranged a speaking engagement to be present for him this weekend, and even that was sitting in the back of my head. All of these emotions that started building up, anger, resentment, frustration, fear that I wasn't a good enough mom, fear that I wasn't a good enough mother to my son, fear that I had somehow failed my daughter in leading her to this place of anxiety, fear that I had no option here and someone was going to be disappointed. Urgency. The meet was 2 hours away and we had 2 hours and 5 minutes to get there. This whole swelling of emotions started boiling up inside of me, and I could literally feel my whole body shake. I felt my body shaking. I felt the heat rising in my body. And what's so interesting is now I have awareness over this very beautiful information in my body. Years ago, I did not. I wasn't even aware that my body was having a reaction. All I would do was simply react. For me, what that used to look like was yelling, screaming at my kids. Or in the office, it used to look like getting angry at one of my team members. Or it would look like retreating and running away, claiming that I just wasn't good enough, claiming that I just would never make it. All of those low-level thoughts and stories and narratives serve to feed these lower-level emotions. And what happened? Cut me off from greater perspective. So let's talk about perspective for a moment. Perspective actually happens in multiple dimensions. It's not just in a sense of time, which is so important, right? We talked about that perspective of time, looking back and being able to see things differently. Hindsight is 20/20. Why? Because we have perspective now. But imagine now perspective in time from an even more global sense. Being able to pull back to a 50,000-foot perspective and seeing from an enormous time-space continuum, this is just one day, one moment in time. My daughter's only going to be 11 and 11 months for this long. It's just this morning that she's having a really difficult morning. Looking at my son and seeing this is just one race. Yes, it's the state's meet, and I told myself that means something really big, but he has greater knowledge into how much I love him and support him. This one meet is not going to make a difference. And look over here. There are other family members who are going to support him. He's not going to feel abandoned or left out. He's going to feel supported. And can I possibly hold space for kindness and compassion and understanding and acceptance in this moment? But it had to start with me. It had to start with giving myself that compassion and understanding and giving myself the knowledge and the awareness that everything is happening for me, not to me. My 11-year-old daughter was not intending to hurt me or to hurt her brother. Hey, maybe she was. I don't know. But in that moment, she was experiencing an anxiety attack. And she couldn't move. She couldn't go. Nothing was happening to me. It was an event that had nothing to do with me. But choosing how I wanted to respond to it within my body first is wholly up to me. And how I can choose to ask myself, how can I see this as a moment happening to me, gives me access to greater perspective. Oh, I can see that this is happening for me. Sorry, not to me, for me. It's not happening to me. The universe is not aligned and conspiring against me to punish me for wrongdoings. There's nothing broken about me or karma coming back to nip me in the butt. This is an opportunity for me to see how things are happening for me. So one way we can do that is by first regulating our nervous system. We have to. There's no gaining greater perspective without it. When your body is in fight or flight, it is literally hijacking your ability to see greater perspective and higher consciousness. We can see it all day and all night when we're sitting up on a mountaintop, looking out over this beautiful landscape, vista vision, parasympathetic nervous system calming us down. Then we get perspective and we say, oh, there are no problems. Everything is happening for me. I am learning how to parent. I'm learning to understand myself more. I am learning to understand my daughter more. I'm learning how to connect with my son in different ways. Oh, isn't this beautiful? This moment, even this difficult moment, is happening for me. But when we're in the moment, how do we do it? When it feels so emotionally charged, the first thing is awareness. This even happens in patient care, in the office, or interaction with your team members. When something triggers you and it makes you stressed or fearful or angry or victimized, awareness. Recognizing in your body, what does that feel like? And saying, oh, wow, I am activated right now. Or maybe you want to use the word triggered. I don't love the word triggered because triggered has a negative connotation where it really is just neutral. It's not good or bad. It's just activating. It's just lighting your nervous system up. And you go straight into fight or flight. And it's so cool. Isn't it so cool how we can be aware in our bodies? Those signs and symptoms are so obvious. Shallow breath, quickening heart rate, heat, flush. You feel hot on your skin, shaking. I mean, I start shaking if I get really angry. Thank you, body, for giving me these beautiful, bright red indicator lights on my dashboard, alerting me to, whoa, you're activated. The moment I recognize that, I know I can tap into my nervous system regulation techniques. For me, the number one most incredibly effective nervous system regulator is breathing. In this situation with my daughter, I had to physically take myself out of the room. I had to leave and go breathe outside. That is the only way I was able to achieve perspective, because in the moment it felt so real and so hot and heavy, and angry was right there under the skin. And I was about to do something I would regret. So I literally moved myself out of the situation outside. We have the same ability in the dental office, in the medical office. And just because your name starts with a doctor does not mean that you are not human, and that there will not be moments in your day where you will be similarly activated. Especially, and hear this please, if you are passionate about what you do, especially if you love what you do, especially if it has huge, deep meaning for you, especially if you value what you do, whether it's your leadership or your skill or your management or care of your patients or the way that you run your business. If it matters to you, you are a prime person to be activated, and it will happen. So recognizing and then choosing to calm yourself down is the most incredible technique. And I'm not saying to bypass those emotions. Of course, man, let me tell you, after this weekend, I cried a river about the situation. But in the moment, I knew I needed to just calm my nervous system down so that I could imagine, how is this happening for me? And then once you can grab just a little moment, a little touch point, a little tiny insight of how this might be happening for me in this moment, what do I choose? How am I going to choose, not react, but choose to respond in this moment with the new insight of how this is happening for me? Then we can reach for gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for this beautiful opportunity that years ago would have lit me up and caused me to do something that is not in alignment with my higher self. Whether that's acting out or thinking something that I know not to be true. Whether it is telling myself that this is happening to me, or simply the empowering stance that this might just be happening for me in the greater perspective. And it's so funny because as I'm telling the story, I'm recognizing that you as the listener are sitting there listening to the story, and it's so clear. It's so beautifully clear. And it's so nice when we have friends that we can talk to say these things to and say, can I just tell you the story about what's going on and you give me your perspective? It's wonderful because they're not in your situation. They're not in your skin. So they have perspective that you don't. And that's the beauty of coaches and therapists and guides and friends and communities, because they come with their own perspective simply because they're living in a different space, looking at you from a different angle. That's all. But here's the thing. We can choose that perspective shift for ourselves at any single moment in time. And as we're approaching the Thanksgiving holidays, I'm so glad to be giving you this concept before Thanksgiving, because the holidays tend to be emotionally driven times, especially when families come together. You know, older people come into a space where there are many little kids and suddenly their worlds are shaken up, or people who live usually in the quiet space of their own home now come into a big space with lots of family members, and other family members activate us with comments or thoughts or insinuations. We have a history with these people. We have other hurts. We have other wins and losses with these people. So remember, as you go into the holidays, you get to choose a new perspective, if only to give yourself an opportunity to feel better. Even if that's your only purpose for finding new perspective. Make it supremely selfish. I need to feel better about myself in this moment, so what is a new perspective? Forget about what's real or what's true, or I've got to keep my mind on reality, because that, my friend, is a whole nother conversation, and reality is just perspective. And that's the truth. Think for a moment about that Thanksgiving table. Picture in your mind's eye a long Thanksgiving table. Notice that every single seat at the table, when someone's sitting in it, has a completely different experience, a completely different perspective. Same Thanksgiving table, same Thanksgiving meal, but if I'm sitting in the middle with people to my left and people to the right and sun shining in my eyes, my experience and my perspective of that meal is very different from my grandmother who's sitting on the head of the table in the dark. See? We get to choose where we sit at the table. And I'm using this metaphorically. If you're sitting with the bright light blinding you and it's hard to see what's going on the table, you can get up and move around and sit on the other side and get a whole new perspective. And we have that power metaphorically at any point in our lives. It does take recognizing how activated you are, because it's almost impossible to get up out of that seat and move around to the other side of the table when you're in fight or flight stress state. So being aware, wow, I'm activated right now, number one. Number two, giving yourself permission to calm down, using your breathing exercises, or even pulling yourself out of the situation, giving yourself a break, stepping into the cold air, stepping outside into the garden, being in nature, whatever serves you to bring you calm. Give yourself a little bit of distance, spatially and time-wise, and choose a new perspective. How can I see this differently with the one fundamental goal to make me feel better and see how this possibly could be happening for me? And then reach for gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for showing me this new perspective. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to choose differently. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to practice my perspective skills. Right? All this beautiful growth and knowledge can be held even in the most uncomfortable moments. In fact, that's where the biggest growth happens. So I'm excited for you as you go forward into the holidays, as you're looking at Thanksgiving and however it's making you feel. I'm excited for you to just imagine, how can I see this differently? Maybe that's, this is a great opportunity for me to practice my boundaries. Or this is a great opportunity for me to practice speaking up and saying no when I don't want to do something, or saying yes when I really do. How can you look at your situation that you're in right now that feels so challenging? It feels like something happening to you, and ask yourself, how can I see this as happening for me? I can't wait to hear what you experience using this little shift in perspective, recognizing and tapping into the power that you have every single moment to choose a new perspective. And I'm excited, by the way, because we're going to be doing this in a bigger masterclass series or workshop rather on December 29th. It is a Friday. And it's going to happen at noon Eastern Standard Time. Join us for a couple of hours for the Reflect and Renew for 2024 as we use some of these perspective techniques on placing greater intention for 2024. So if you felt like 2023 really was you reacting to circumstances around you, you feeling victimized to the place that you are and to the relationships or the work that you're in, or just feeling like you've lost your power, we're going to make 2024 intentional with these greater practices so that you can have great intention for yourself. We're going to focus on a few core components within our lives. Yes, we're going to talk about money. Yes, we're going to talk about relationships. Yes, we're going to talk about health and wellness. Yes, we're going to be talking about contribution and the greater impact on the world around us. And yes, we're going to be talking about health and happiness, of course. So join me on the 29th of December. And if you want to register, you want to get in there soon so that we can save you a spot, because I'm keeping it small, I ask you to head over to www.thebizofhappiness.com. I'll be sure to leave a link in the show notes and register. I'll be waiting for you there. In the meantime, remember, when you feel good, that, my friend, is when you can do good. Bye-bye.